Real excited to bring David Cummings to the stage to moderate our conversation with George Azih. David, of course, is founder of the Atlanta Tech Village and just great entrepreneur in his own right, founding, I don't know, I've lost count, 10 companies that have done well. Pardot, for example, our firm uses, as many on today's call do. So David, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our speaker and moderate the discussion.
President Carr, I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here today to introduce George Azih. George and I had a chance to meet several years ago. George is the consummate entrepreneur's entrepreneur. So when you think of the entrepreneur that really puts him or herself out there, is willing to run through brick walls, willing to do whatever it takes to be successful, that really epitomizes George. Some of the highlights from his background: started the business after graduating from the University of Georgia. His company was named #1 to the Bulldog 100. So the Bulldog 100 is the fastest growing entrepreneur-led businesses from UGA graduates. And so he's came in #1. He raised a $40 million Series A round from Goldman Sachs, one of the largest Series A rounds ever in Atlanta history. And he's just an all-around great guy. So I'm excited to bring George to the stage.
Thank you so much, David, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for having me. I should say my dad, I grew up in Nigeria, and my dad was actually a Rotarian in Jos in Nigeria. So your organization has wide reach. So I remember getting the magazines. He actually subscribed to the Rotary magazines. And that's a very fond memory of mine growing up.
Well, let's just jump right in, George. Tell us about your journey to becoming an entrepreneur. When did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I like to say I'm kind of a charlatan when it comes to being an entrepreneur. I'm one of the a lot of entrepreneurs decided that they wanted to be entrepreneurs, very early on. I certainly wasn't the case. I just happened to find a problem that I was intimately passionate about and was willing to solve. And so that was really what happened. I was trying to solve a problem that I had, and when I looked around in the marketplace, nothing existed. So I knew it was a big enough problem that other companies would need it. And so we, I decided to start a company to solve that.
That's awesome. So take us through your experience. So you graduate from the University of Georgia. What did you do after college, and how long until you started LeaseQuery?
So after college, I went to work at a public accounting firm called Porter Cato Moore. They're now part of Whitby, and I worked there auditing banks and insurance companies, so financial institutions. In 2008, obviously there was a financial crisis, and I left there and went to go work for Graphic Packaging, which is a large company here based in Atlanta. So that was in 2008, worked in graphic packaging from 2008 through essentially 2015, which is when I quit that full-time job. Now, what happened was in 2008 as well, graphic packaging changed auditors from PwC to Ernst & Young. And when they made that change, EY decided, since this was a first-time audit for them, they were going to take a deeper dive into the financials. And one of the areas they looked at was leasing. And there were some things that were, that were being done incorrectly. It wasn't material, but it was still incorrect nonetheless. And in my role at Graphic Packaging, what I really was supposed to be focused on was technical accounting and accounting research. So figure out what the EITF, the Emerging Issues Task Force, what were they looking at changing and making sure that the organization would be able to get their preferred accounting treatment. So in that role, I knew that the accounting for leases were changing, and so I'm sitting there saying, hey, accounting for leases today, we're not doing it correctly, and it's easy. B, there's no companies out there, because I did a search to see who would solve that problem, that immediate problem right then. There was no company that was doing it. And C, it's about to get more complex. So with these things kind of lined together, I figured that, why not me to provide a solution?
That's great. So you said they were about to get more complex.
Yes.
In what way?
So right now, I don't want to nerd out here in accounting, but right now, there's a bifurcation between public and private companies. But At that time, accounting for leases was what's called an off-balance sheet transaction. What that meant is if you sign a lease, nowhere on your balance sheet does it reflect that you owe a landlord a certain amount over a certain period of time, right? So you have what are called operating leases that essentially are just cash flow, right? I mean, it's a little more complex than this, but when you make your payments and you debit expense and you credit cash, right? That was the accounting treatment. Now, why did the boards decide to change it? Well, if you consider two organizations, right? Company A, Company B, utilizing the exact same asset. Company A purchases the asset. They get a loan to fund the purchase of the asset, and they now have an asset on their books. So the financial statements are you're going to have a loan representing the liability to fund the purchase, and you're going to have an asset because you now own the property. You depreciate the asset and you make payments on the loan, which means you have interest expense. Now, consider Company B decides rather than purchase the asset, they decide to rent it. In that realm now, what they have is essentially they don't have an asset because they don't own it, and they don't have a liability because there's no loan. However, you could make the argument that they do have a liability because they have an obligation to make payments, which technically is the definition of a liability over a period of time. So what the boards decided to do was to make that expense, that rent expense, look like a loan. In which case you go in and you take the present value of your minimum of those lease payments and you record over that period of time and you record a liability on your books. The math is pretty complex, and our software helps companies get the math right.
Incredible. So all these companies could sign massive leases, and from a financial statements point of view, up until this rules change, they didn't have to show it in a normal way. And now your software makes it so that it automates the tracking and reporting around all these leases that companies have.
That's exactly right. Our software, you plug in, you plug it in and enter all your leases, and the output we give you gives you all your journal entries, your disclosure reports. This is the biggest change that's happened to accounting since 1978. I mean, it is huge. So it's a very big problem for companies out there, and that's really what fueled our growth in those 3 years.
So you were working at Graphic Packaging. Did you go full-time on the new startup, or did you start moonlighting and working on it part-time after hours? What was that like?
Definitely working on it after on the side, right? Started I had the idea for the company in March 2000. Not the idea, I decided to do it in March 2010. And then the first line of code was not written. I'm non-technical. The first line of code was not written until September 2011. We got our first client, which is a client based here in Atlanta called Fresh to Order. That was our very first client for $500. We got that effectively January 2014. The check came in 2013, but I cashed it. That's when it matters as a true business. Cashed it in January 2014, and I did not quit my job full time until 2015/16.
So what was the impetus to quit your job? What sort of milestone or threshold did you want to see to go full time?
Well, honestly, it was, see, that's what I'm saying. I'm kind of a charlatan here when it comes to this. I did not quit my job on purpose, right? I did on purpose, but I was forced to do it. What happened was I was working, as I said, full-time jobs, LeaseQuery at night and on weekends, and Graphic Packaging during the day. And I mean, I was working easily 95-hour weeks. And that's not good. That's awful to do on your body. And my body literally broke down. I developed a disease called myasthenia gravis, which is triggered by stress, right? And so I kind of, I knew I had to settle down, and I took a leave of absence from work for health reasons. But I was still working on Graphic, trying to, because I was wearing an eye patch. What myasthenia gravis does is it gives you double vision. I was wearing an eye patch. And it was, I was seeing two images, and I would have these splitting headaches. Imagine if you wear contacts or glasses. Imagine going through an entire day without wearing them, right? Those kinds of headaches. That's essentially what happened to me. So in that realm, I decided, okay, I had to quit and do one thing, right? It was either going to be LeaseQuery or it was going to be going back to Graphic Packaging. Well, as I said, I was having these splitting headaches because I couldn't see my screens and the computer. So technically I was like, that's out, right? I cannot really be an accountant anymore. And so I decided I can still talk, I can still sell. And so I decided to sell LeaseQuery. Now, here's the crazy thing. I wish I had done that sooner. I was forced to do it, as I said, for health reasons, to kind of cut back on one job. But we went from having about 10 clients when I started to we literally doubled in the 3 months that I said, okay, let me focus on LeaseQuery full time. And I think that's what happens whenever you're an entrepreneur on one side that has a full-time job. It's funny, one of the I've read a quote that said, for the aspiring entrepreneur, the greatest drug out there is a good full-time paying job, right? Because it forces you to, those are essentially kind of handcuffs. If you want to be an entrepreneur, there's nothing wrong with having a full-time job, but if your goal is entrepreneurship, that full-time job is going to constrain you because it's comfortable, right? So that's why I did not quit at first. And they say doing that is kind of like having one foot in hot water and having another foot in cold water and convincing yourself that your body's warm, right? So when I went all in, that's really when our growth really started.
Yeah, I've heard a similar quote that salary is like heroin to the non-entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So let's talk about fundraising. So you quit your job because of health challenges. You had to make that decision. Did you go raise a bunch of money? Did you bootstrap? What did you do next?
Well, we bootstrapped. One of the challenges, I kind of was forced to bootstrap because when you go raise money, no one wants to make an investment in a company whose entire existence is predicated on an action the government is going to perform, right? And the action that we were waiting for the government to perform was to institute these new lease accounting changes, right? So I knew deep down that it was going to happen because it just made sense, right? As I explained it now, if you look at, for instance, at the time, the example I would always use is Papa John's. If you look at Papa John's balance sheet, right? Look at Papa John's balance sheet. Well, at the time, I'm not sure if Papa John's is now publicly traded, but at the time, if you look at Papa John's balance sheet, nowhere did it say that it owed. It was 80 million at the time. This was 2013. It was $80 million that they owed over that period to all their landlords. Nowhere does it reflect that. And that's kind of important information, isn't it? And this was also in the backdrop of Enron. Enron was what triggered this. They used to use what were called synthetic leases to disguise liabilities as assets, right? That's literally what created the demise of Enron. And so because of all this, I was fairly certain that the boards were going to make these changes and trigger, this problem for companies. However, I did not say it was very difficult to fundraise on that on this probability, even though I thought it was a pretty high probability. So what we decided to do was bootstrap and make the company profitable as we were building it, right? So that was the impetus for us bootstrapping as opposed to trying to raise money.
And so one of the amazing things about your business that really blew me away early on was that you would convince CFOs and customers to prepay 3 years at a time. So as an entrepreneur, you're getting all this cash up front, and then you could use it as, unofficial working capital to grow the business. Will you talk about that for a little bit?
Yes. So what happened is when I quit my job and we were seeing some success, we got into the cash flow problem, right? You close a deal today, you don't see any cash from that deal for 90 days, but yet you still have to onboard and you have engineers to pay. And so we did fall into this cash flow crunch and that's the point at which software companies go and raise money, right? Because you can show that you're closing deals, but we didn't have that option available to us at the time, I thought. So what we decided to do was, change the way we charge. And how, as you said, what we did was we started getting 3 years up front from our closed deals. And so people, that was pretty radical at the time. How could you do that? But the idea what we told them, because when you go through these deals, you have to go through procurement, supply chain, talk to legal, so it's a very challenging process to close this deal. And we tell them, hey, do you want to go through this again next year, right? And frankly, if you think you're going to come with us for just 1 year, we want to be your partners, right? If you think we're not going to satisfy you, right? We want you to be vested in this just as much as we are, right? So that was the line of communication, which is true. You don't want if our software doesn't work, people get fired, right? One of the challenges that we had to overcome was one of the big challenges was companies would come to us and say, we think your software works, right? We're not sure. And so to our caveat to that would be, hey, use our software for 30 days. And if you don't think it works at that point, then we shake hands and part as friends. And when they use it, we gave it to them for free for 30 days. They realize it works. It's exactly what we need, right? So now the challenge we have to overcome at that point is the financial piece, right? And so the CFO would always say, because accountants are pretty conservative, right? I mean, they're very conservative. So the CFOs a lot of times would say, hey, George, we have literally never heard of you. We've literally never heard of LeaseQuery. But if I hire IBM and it completely fails, right? IBM is actually one of our competitors. If I hire IBM and it completely fails, guess what? I hired IBM, right? If I go with you guys and just something small occurs, I could get fired because why on earth would I choose you guys over IBM? So when we did our Series A round, that was one of the reasons we went with Goldman Sachs, right? Goldman Sachs wasn't even our highest valuation at the time. But I like to say, look at the world through the eyes of your consumer, right? And in the eyes of our consumer, if we had gone with Sequoia or Andreessen or any of these big firms, it would have been, obviously in our industry, everyone would know them. But does the average CFO know who Sequoia is? But they know who Goldman is. And they know that Goldman is not in the business of picking losers. And so that was part of what precipitated our taking money from Goldman specifically.
That's great. What's the state of the union of the business today? How many employees, locations, all those kinds of fun things?
Well, we now have two offices. We have an office in Birmingham, Alabama, and an office in Atlanta where I am. Due to COVID, we were expecting to have about 120% growth this year. Due to COVID, it was only going to be about 30%. And we're right about 200 employees. It's funny, I was looking the other day, we have hired in COVID, we've hired about 40, almost 40 people. So those are people we've never met and like literally never met live. So we have to do something to with our culture to kind of get them into the LeaseQuery culture. So that's we're over $20 million ARR in annual recurring revenue, but because we collect money up front, we're about $60 million in collections.
That's great. What's Atlanta been like as a place to grow your startup? Any organizations that you've plugged in for mentorship?
Absolutely. I think, you talked about the first time we met. There's this program called Endeavor that we joined, and that has been an amazing opportunity for us through Endeavor, meeting people like you who I distinctly remember the first time that wasn't the first time we met, but the first time we met about LeaseQuery in your office. And, we're showing you our numbers. And I remember saying, hey, I think we can, we're going to hire 5 new SDRs. And you looked at us like we were crazy, first of all. And you said, I'm looking at your numbers here. Why not 50? Right? And Chris, our CRO, and I looked at each other and we're like, yeah, why not 50? Right? And as we're riding down the elevator, we talk about it like, oh, first of all, because there's a lot of things that become very different, right? If you're going to hire 50 people, then you can't interview, you'll have to interview 300, right? And we couldn't do that. So that's why we said, okay, well, now we have to get a recruiter in-house, right? So that conversation kind of changed the dynamics of how we were, of our viewpoint for the company, and forced us to really think about growth and scale. And that's what you and Endeavor did for us. So thank you.
That's great. What's it been like to hire in Atlanta? How's the talent pool? What have you noticed?
Well, in Atlanta, there are some challenges, right? One of the challenges, once again, is raising money. And that's because the funds in Atlanta, I mean, we raised a $40 million fund. the funds based in Atlanta are just not that big enough to accommodate that. The vast majority of them. That's why we had to go, in New York and San Francisco with Goldman. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge, as far as hiring is concerned, is sometimes in the executive roles, it's challenging to find people who have been there, done that, because our companies are relatively young. The Atlanta companies, there's few and far between that. There's a lot that exists now. So I think in the next 5-10 years there'll be just a multitude of people that have been there, done that, because of the large companies that Atlanta is currently building. But for instance, we're looking for a CFO. Right. So shameless plug. Right. We're looking for a CFO, and what we're looking for is someone who comes from the operations side, and who has taken a company from 20 million to 100 and to $100 million ARR, and so someone who's done that before. Well, there's very few options of those in Atlanta, right? So that could be challenging for the executive roles. Now, for the director and management, there is serious talent in Atlanta, right? Especially for those that are coming from larger companies that are hungry and want to get with something exciting and are ready to roll up their sleeves and build something, right? In that realm, hiring for those positions has been exciting, right? There's options there.
That's great. All right, we're getting close to the end here. Tell us about the Bulldog 100. What is it? And how was the experience of being the fastest growing UGA alumni entrepreneur for last year?
Well, I'm proud to have gone to UGA. It's one of my I'm a proud Bulldog, right? I came this close to going to Georgia Tech because that's what I've always thought. I wanted to be an engineer, but my dad wanted me to be a doctor, and so he told me you're absolutely not going to Tech. You're going to UGA. So thank goodness, Dad knows best, right? He made me go to UGA, and I still did not become a doctor. So go figure. The Bulldog 100 was very proud for me because, at the time almost everyone in our company came from UGA. Not almost everyone, a bunch of our executives are. Our CRO, as I said, was my college roommate. Chris Ramsey was my college roommate at UGA. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. Our general counsel, right, came from UGA. I knew him all through college. One of our accounting firm is a partner, is Aprio, and the partner we work with is also a college friend from UGA. So what I loved about that award was that it showed how intricate UGA was to the success of the company, right? It's all about our team, and if I didn't have that team, which I met at UGA, absolutely, positively, no way we are here today. Absolutely. So that's what that award means to us. So we've received a bunch of different awards, and that one is really. And I've never really been an awards person, frankly speaking, but I've learned through HR that it's important for recruiting, right? Because people want to work for successful companies. So that's the only reason that we, push these things out. If not, I would just rather keep my head grinding.
In the startup world, we like to joke that there's no award beneath us. We're ready to apply and try to win every single award for HR reasons primarily, as well as ego reasons. Exactly. So George, I want to say thank you for joining us today on Rotary. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your stories. Such an amazing startup here in Atlanta. And I just can't thank you enough for your time today. So back to you, President.
Well, great. And George, don't go yet, but I just want to say what a fascinating discussion about the thrills and chills of starting a successful company. So George, congratulations so far. And David, thank you for just moderating a great discussion. George, I did have just one question as we wrap up. An incredible journey. What have you learned about your own leadership style, and how do you know when to dig in and have conviction and stay with your conviction, and how do you know when to back off and bend to others' advice?
Well, I want my major leadership style, I think, is to really let let my managers manage. Right? They know better than me. As I said, I try to hire people that have done this before, that have been on this journey before. And there's absolutely no reason to hire people smarter than you and you dictate what they do. Right? I let my managers manage. And I learned that early on during this journey. I had an HR person call me, one of the external recruiters we were using, call me directly, telling me, "Hey, we have challenges with this with your VP of HR." And so, I listened to him, and then I said, "Well, don't worry, I'll talk to her." And I sent an email telling her, "Here's what we should do." And she came in my office, shut the door, and she said, "George, the challenge here is A, you've undermined me, right? B, next time there's a challenge, he will come to you directly, right?" And I said, "Nah, don't worry about it. I doubt it." Literally 2 weeks later, he came to me for something, right? And what use is having people that are your representatives when every other person that's supposed to work with them comes through you, right? I can't scale, so I need to make sure that I empower them, and they know that everybody else knows that they are speaking for me. So now I like to say I want to be the least powerful CEO in Atlanta, right? Where everybody knows, listen, don't come to George because he'll send you to someone else. And it's hard for people to grasp that, but hopefully it's taken hold.
Well, wonderful message and leadership. And maybe just a last question for you. I know, as you look into 2021, what are some milestones you look forward to? I know you're looking to hire a CFO. What else what else is in store for 2021 as far as what you're looking to do?
Well, we're looking at acquiring one of our competitors here. It's a strategic acquisition. I'm very excited about them. They have a very good product, but they need our sales experience. So that'll be a great partnership. We're looking to double next year, so at least 100% growth. That's something we're excited about. Thinking we'll probably get up to about 300 people. One of the things that we're looking at is, do we need a large real estate footprint here? Because now we've seen that the company operates, can continue to operate under, still while restricted to house confinement under COVID. But the one thing I do miss is our energy, right? Whenever you walk through our office and you see all these young people, and by young, I mean the average employee here is 28 years old, right? You just see their energy, you feel their energy. There's something, and the passion, I love to say our HR department has done an incredible job of hiring people and bringing people aboard that share this passion of hey, let's build this thing together, right? I always say everyone rows the boat. Your job is important. And so that energy, that passion, you just can't replicate digitally. So that's why I think we'll continue to operate once it's safe. We'll continue to operate in person.
Well, exciting year ahead for you, and we look forward to hearing more about your continued success. But thank you again for spending time with us today and just talking about a wide range of topics. Not only your own company, but the Atlanta employment pool and fundraising insights and just your own journey. And David, thank you for guiding a great discussion.